Let's be real for a second. We are watching an absolutely historic collapse happening in real time, and not in some subtle slow burn way. No, we're talking full-on, face-first, pants around the ankles wipeout. The biggest entertainment franchises on the planet, things that felt as permanent as gravity, are dying, one by one. And the crazy part? They did it to themselves. This isn't bad luck. This isn't the economy. This isn't audiences have changed. This is what happens when the people running these franchises get so deep into their own heads, so drunk on their own self-importance that they completely forget why anyone gave a damn about their shows in the first place. And the freshest corpse on the pile? Doctor Who. 60 years. This show survived everything. Budget cuts, cast changes, decade-long hiatuses, actual cancellation back in the 80s, and it always came back. That's not a franchise, that's a cockroach, in the best possible way. And then Russell T Davies, the same guy who resurrected the show back in 2005, comes back for a second run and personally drives it into a ditch. The production company? Gone. The Christmas specials? Cancelled. Disney, who was supposed to be the big savior with their money, they took one look at the ratings and said, yeah, no thanks. Here's what happened. Instead of giving people Doctor Who, quirky British sci-fi, time travel, wit, wonder, the new creative team decided the show needed to be a lecture every single episode. Gender politics, identity discourse, historical revisionism so heavy-handed it made your eyes roll back into your skull. Ncuti Gatwa was cast as the first black, openly gay doctor. And look, the role had potential, but instead of letting him be the doctor, the writers turned him into the main character of a weepy melodrama that had nothing to do with what made this show special. The audience didn't hate the casting, they hated the writing. Big difference, one that the showrunners never bothered to understand. Gatwa bailed, Davies bailed, Disney pulled the plug, and now Doctor Who is officially dead. Not on a hiatus, dead. Because the people in charge were more interested in making a point than in making good television. 60 years of history, gone, because somebody couldn't separate their personal agenda from their job. Doctor Who wasn't a fluke. Because while that dumpster fire was still smoldering, Star Trek was busy doing the exact same thing, just slower and somehow even more depressing to watch. The movies? Dead in the water for years. The streaming shows? An absolute slog. Nobody asked for them, nobody watched them, and Paramount kept greenlighting new ones anyway, like some kind of delusional slot machine that just needed one more pool to hit the jackpot. The final nail was Starfleet Academy, Paramount's big genius idea to pull in Gen Z. A show about body-positive cadets processing their queer situationships and childhood trauma. In space. In space, people! That was the pitch. That got greenlit. Someone in a boardroom said, yes, this is what Star Trek needs. And apparently nobody in that room had ever watched a single episode of the original series. The ratings were so catastrophically bad they were losing to random YouTube videos. Not Netflix originals, not HBO, YouTube videos. Paramount pulled the plug, and now Star Trek, one of the most beloved sci-fi franchises in human history, has 0 active projects. Nothing in development, just silence and the faint smell of burnt bridges. Then there's Star Wars. God, where do you even start with Star Wars? Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012 and has spent the last 13 years running the most expensive nostalgia exploitation operation in Hollywood history. The formula is simple. Take something fans love, remind them it exists, deliver something half-assed, then call the audience toxic when they notice. The Mandalorian and Grogu was supposed to fix everything. 7 years since the last theatrical Star Wars, big return to the big screen. Pedro Pascal, Baby Yoda, the whole thing. It bombed. Empty theaters worldwide. No hype, no buzz, no nothing. Just tumbleweeds and the sound of Disney accountants quietly updating their spreadsheets. And instead of any kind of honest self-reflection, the actor playing the Mandalorian, Brandon Wayne, goes to the press and actually tells fans to shut up. Direct quote basically, "This is our Star Wars, not yours." Sir, Sir, the audience is the reason Star Wars exists. You don't get to make a product for consumers and then tell consumers their opinions are invalid. That's not how any of this works. Oh, and the filmmakers had the nerve to complain that $170 million wasn't enough budget to make something decent. $170 million, not counting marketing, and they want sympathy for that? Unbelievable. Now, The Witcher. This one genuinely hurts because The Witcher had everything. Rich source material, a passionate fan base, Henry Cavill, a guy who actually read the books, loved the books, and fought to protect them. The show had a real shot of being the next Game of Thrones. Then the writers opened their mouths. Turns out they thought Andrzej Sapkowski's novels were too complicated, too dated, too Polish apparently. So they decided to rewrite the deep Slavic mythology, the political complexity, the morally ambiguous characters, and replace all of it with California social trends and their own personal aesthetic preferences. Henry Cavill tried to push back. He fought for the source material behind the scenes for years. Eventually, he just quit, and honestly, good for him, because staying would have been undignified. They replaced them with Liam Hemsworth, dropped the spin-off prequel called Blood Origin that was so bad it became a meme, and officially transformed one of the most promising fantasy shows in years into a cautionary tale that film students will study for decades. 3 franchises, 3 different networks, 3 completely different genres. Same exact cause of death. So we've got dead sci-fi, dead fantasy, dead space operas. Surely the superhero giants are holding it together, right? Marvel, DC, these things are basically financial institutions at this point. Too big to fail, too embedded in the culture to just collapse. Yeah, about that. After Endgame, one of the biggest cinematic events in modern history, Marvel somehow decided the smart move was to flood the market with the most aggressively mediocre content imaginable. An endless conveyor belt of D-list characters, cheap-looking Disney Plus shows, and films that felt less like movies and more like homework assignments for a franchise you're already exhausted by. And instead of action, instead of spectacle, instead of the pure dumb fun that made these movies work, you get lectures, social justice subplots stapled onto scripts that weren't good enough to carry them. Characters who exist not because they're interesting, but because a diversity checklist needed filling. The audience isn't stupid. They noticed, and they stopped showing up. Kevin Feige is now visibly scrambling, reshuffling release schedules, retooling projects mid-production, doing everything except the one thing that would actually help, which is admitting the last 4 years were a creative disaster and starting over with some humility. DC's reboot under James Gunn isn't looking much better. The new Superman had an underwhelming debut at the box office, and the upcoming Supergirl movie, based purely on early signals and the spectacular behavior of its lead actress, who seems to have genuinely confused playing a superhero with being one, is already shaping up to cost Warner Brothers another 9-figure loss. And then there's The Boys. This one stings the most, because The Boys started as something genuinely rare, a show that was cynical and brutal and smart, that skewered corporate culture, media manipulation, and superhero worship with equal cruelty and zero sacred cows. It was the antidote to everything wrong with the genre. By its final seasons, it had become the thing it mocked. The sharp satire softened into partisan talking points. The plot stopped moving. Characters who used to be complex and unpredictable turned into walking Twitter arguments. And the finale? Don't even get me started on the finale. Managed to piss off virtually everyone across the entire political spectrum simultaneously, which is almost impressive in its own terrible way. So here's what all of these disasters have in common. Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, The Witcher, Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings on Prime, Marvel, DC, The Boys. Every single one of them was killed or seriously wounded, not by competition, not by changing tastes, not by streaming wars or TikTok or whatever excuse is convenient this week. They were killed by the people making them believing their own bullshit. The moment a creator stops asking, "Is this good?" and starts asking, "Is this brave?" that's when you're in trouble. The moment the audience becomes the enemy instead of the point, That's when the obituary gets written. These franchises weren't taken from us by outside forces. They were handed over to people who fundamentally did not respect them, or the audiences who loved them. And then those people acted shocked when the audiences left. Will anyone actually learn from this? Probably not. The same executives who greenlit these disasters are already developing the next ones. The same creative philosophies that tanked billion-dollar franchises are already being applied to whatever comes next. But maybe, just maybe, enough of these very expensive, very public failures will eventually force someone in a position of power to ask a genuinely radical question. What if we just made something people actually wanted to watch? Wild concept, I know.